Hello, I'm Robert Godwin Jones from Virginia Commonwealth University, and I'm going to be talking today about generative AI and language learning and what are the pros and cons of using AI in language teaching and learning. It wasn't too long after the release of ChatGPT in late 2022 before we started seeing YouTube videos like this one that language teachers have been replaced by generative AI. All you need to learn another language is to make use of AI chatbots. Well, I would argue, yes, AI chatbots can do wonderful things for language learners and teachers, but they can only take you so far in learning another language. And that's the main thing that I wanted to talk about today. Obviously, AI chatbots can be very beneficial in providing a patient and non-judgmental conversation partner. And this is particularly useful at the beginning levels, I would argue. You can practice pronunciation, you can practice the structures, the vocabulary that you're learning, and you can get feedback. You can instruct the AI system to let you know when you've made an error or when there's a better way of saying something in the target language. And one of the benefits of AI systems is that they recall previous conversations, and so you can instruct the AI to flag particular errors that you've made repeatedly. I would argue, however, that the AI practice, conversation practice, is very useful, but can only take you so far. And in particular, that there are limitations that, in terms of developing interactional pro proficiency and pragmatic abilities in the language. And I'll talk about that a little bit more today. We've seen lots of instructional videos, conference presentations, peer-reviewed articles on using AI in language learning. I've published a couple of those. And there have been a lot of different areas that have been looked at. One of the main ones is using AI in helping develop writing abilities in the target language. And I published a piece in Language of the Journal, Language Learning and Technology, on distributed agency in language learning, which talks about the fact that with using an AI tool in writing is really a cooperative process where you very different than how we typically use computer tools. And there's a more intimate relationship that typically you develop with the AI system. Of course, teachers have been very nervous about students simply copying, pasting from AI to turn in assignments. Um, and language teachers have been leery for a long time about machine translation, but studies in machine translation and also more recently in students using AI in language learning have shown that typically students don't do that. They use machine translation, Google Translate, they use ChatGPT for looking up uh, individual words and phrases and checking on individual sentences, and not so much for just copying and pasting. Now, one of the things that teachers should be doing is talking about ethical and responsible uses of AI in the classroom and walking students through writing prompts and rewriting prompts to get what it is that that they need, and doing that in all stages of the writing process, from gathering ideas to first drafts to final editing, just showing the students what an AI system can do. And of course, we've also seen that AI is a wonderful teacher's aid in terms of creating learning materials, stories, for example, that can be accompanied by images, on a particular topic at a particular level of proficiency using a given set of vocabulary or grammatical constructions. So it can be a wonderful supplement to a textbook because you can customize the kinds of materials that would be most useful for your particular context of learning. So there are lots of things that can be done with AI in terms of language learning and language instruction. But there are a lot of limits to what AI can do. And one of the important things for both teachers and learners is to develop critical AI literacy, understanding all the wonderful things that AI can do, but also the limitations. And those limitations are built into how AI has developed its language abilities. And I want to talk about that very briefly. One of the myths about AI is the name intelligence. Artificial intelligence makes you think it's very similar to human intelligence. It's not. What AI systems, generative AI systems are doing is they're repackaging the learning data that they've used to develop their language ability. They do that in an amazing way that seems like it's could have been produced by a human being, but they're not really understanding. This is the amazing thing about AI. They're not really understanding the output or understanding how it relates to the real world. They're really just repackaging words that have been translated actually into mathematical symbols. So it's a statistical process that they're using to output language. Another misnomer is prompt engineering. Makes you think engineering, well, it's a predictable process and follows certain patterns and rules. It's more an art than a science. You have to not just enter an initial prompt, you have to reword it. Each time you put in a slightly different wording, you get a very different output from AI. So it's kind of like wizardry or doing an incantation. You have to come up with just the right mix of words to get the output that you're looking for. That picture of a wizard reminded me of a video of interview with the most famous linguist on earth, Noam Chomsky, in which he was asked, do AI systems teach us anything interesting or new about human language? His answer was no. Well, the problem for Chomsky is that AI kind of uh, works against his linguistic theories in the sense that uh, Chomsky uh, claimed that there was a uniquely innate human language ability because we are born with a language acquisition device, he called it. Well, AI systems are not born and don't have any language acquisition device. They have developed their language through an entirely different process that I'll talk about briefly that actually shows the viability, the validity of a usage-based theory of language. Hallucination. Well, if you use the word hallucination to refer to the times when AI systems go off on a tangent or tell things that are not true, it makes you think, well, normally AI systems work in the real world, and then occasionally, like humans who are taking drugs, they go off into la la land and make things up. Well, that's not the case. They're always perpetually in la la land. They don't have any connection to the real world. They don't understand the real world. Early AI systems tried to teach computer systems about how the world works and about how language works. They weren't very successful. Human society and human language are much too complex to be broken into a set of instructions and rules. It doesn't work that way. So it has a very loose connection, AI systems do, large language models do, to our real world. The other myth is that we see in research on AI and language learning um, claims that AI really produces a language that uh, duplicates what we do as human beings. Here are some examples of that. That AI chatbots can facilitate an authentic interactional language learning environment. The second one, that AI use is essential for promoting cultural sensitivity, intercultural competency, and global awareness. Or the third, that AI-based virtual reality supplies the benefits of in-country immersion programs without the hassle, without having to actually go there. So the implication here in those claims is that AI output is linguistically and culturally authentic enough that it could substitute for human conversation partners or even for study abroad experience. Well, if we assume that, then we're going beyond grammatical and lexical accuracy in language use. Because if we say, well, it's not only linguistically accurate, but culturally authentic, what that means is that AI can use language in ways that are socially and culturally appropriate to the context and to the conversation partner. AI can't do that. AI can't do that. It's putting together phrases and words. It starts with the basic way that an AI system outputs language is that it calculates what the next likely word is in a sequence of text and extrapolates from that to a whole sentence, to a whole paragraph, to a whole essay, right? But it's not really understanding what it's putting together. It's using a statistical mathematical process to do that in machine learning. It's a very complex system, and it's based on a huge data training set that allows it to go through, and it's a large array of very powerful computers that work very fast to go through that data and figure out what the next token or word, because it's translated everything into mathematical symbols, what the next token or word is going to be in a string of text. And that's not how human beings develop our language abilities. And what that means in terms of language output from an AI, it can't duplicate what we do as human beings. And that's particularly true in certain languages, in so-called low resource languages. Those are languages like less commonly taught languages or indigenous languages, where there's not a large collection of digitized text. And in fact, one of the main problems with AI systems in terms of cultural authenticity is that most of the training data has been in English, has been estimated up to 96%. And that brings with it not only a linguistic bias, but also a cultural bias because the sources that it's used, taken from the internet and digitized texts, are mostly Western sources, and that is problematic in terms of cultural orientation. So we need critical AI literacy for both teachers and learners. We have to be aware of the benefits. We have to also be clearly aware of the limitations that AI systems have. And we have to be wide-eyed in working with this system and be very aware of how these systems have developed their language abilities and what the implications for that are in terms of the authenticity and believable and usefulness of the language output from AI systems. The issue also with AI, and here too, this is part of developing a critical AI literacy, is to understand that how these systems work is very different than traditional computer software that computer scientists write line by line, writing the computer code and knowing exactly what's going on in that code and can go back in and change it if the output is not what they expected or wanted. That's how traditional computer science works. That's not how these systems work. The amazing thing to me, about generative AI is the computer scientists who've developed these AI systems still don't know exactly how they work. They're mostly a black box in terms of the internal process that's going on. They have a general sense, obviously, the designers of these systems, of how they work, but the intricacies of the machine learning process of the multiple artificial neural networks that are involved there. Um, that's largely a mystery to everyone, including the computer scientists. And so what that means is that we're dealing with something that's very different than traditional computer systems or traditional tools. There's an unpredictability there that's very concerning, I think, in a lot of ways. One of the things that's important to realize is that as human beings, we are socialized into our language abilities. And what that means is that we start in a fairly small social environment in the family, right? We go to school, we ex gradually expand those social circles. Then we get friends, we go to work, so we encounter different social situations, and we develop our language abilities accordingly. And what is involved there is not just verbal language, but also nonverbals. So how we use gestures, how we use facial expressions, how we use body language, but also how we use tone of voice, paralanguage, how we use sarcasm, irony, humor. Those are things that are part of our interactional ability in the language that we speak and that we want to develop also in any new language that we learn. Those are things that are not available to AI. AI has not been socialized into language use, but rather sees language as a statistical problem. Uh, that translating language words into mathematical symbols and then rearranging those so that the output matches what it finds in its learning data as human language. So it has no real understanding of that. One of the advantages of talking about how AI systems work to students is to emphasize that AI systems are based on a usage-based um, perspective on language, not on rules, but on patterns of language that are used, reused, varied. That's how language works. And I think too often still in classrooms today, uh, students assume that the language is based on learning a set of vocabulary and a set of grammatical constructions. That's not the case. And AI systems show, in fact, that language is based on multi-word constructions, such as collocations, such as particular syntactical structures, such as idiomatic expressions that are used and reused and varied. And that's really what these AI systems demonstrate. And I think that's a useful thing to point out to students. Well, why is it that AI systems will have difficulties in terms of developing um, pragmatic or interactional abilities uh, for learners through use of chatbots, AI chatbots? Well, the as I mentioned before, uh, the socialization process that we go through makes us aware of the fact that literal language that's used when we speak may not convey the real meaning of what we have to say. We often are ironic, sarcastic, humorous, and the real meaning is not in the actual words, but in the intonation of our voice, in our nonverbal behavior. We can interpret what the real meaning is because we've been socialized into being able to do that. AI systems don't have that ability. Now we're seeing now multimedia capabilities being built into AI systems, not just text in and out, but audio and video, images in and out. And what might come with that is the ability of AI systems to better detect the real meaning behind human speech. We're certainly not there yet. And I'm skeptical to what extent AI systems ever will be able to really um, have the talent, abilities, the capabilities that human beings have developed over a long period of socialization to understand the nuances, the linguistic and cultural nuances of language use. So if we're using AI as a chat partner in language learning, what can we expect? Well, it's good at having learners practice pronunciation, basic expressions, vocabulary that they're learning at, trying out new grammatical structures. And AI systems can, of course, provide feedback to learners on mistakes that they've made or ways to improve their language abilities. What's not so good, what we can expect from practice with AI chatbot is development of pragmatic behaviors and ability to negotiate meaning with a conversation partner. Um, Developing interactional and strategic competence. Strategic competence, what I mean by that is when a conversation breaks down, the ability to get around roadblocks, for example, and not knowing particular vocabulary or grammatical structures, or asking for help, or back channeling, those kinds of things that can facilitate a negotiation of meaning. Those are things that are not likely to be developed through AI chats, but are much more likely to be developed through real human to human conversation. One of the things that's been interesting to me about studies of using AI in language learning is the realization that conversations are far from natural that we have with AI chatbots, whether that be in a voice format or in written formats. We tend to have conversations that are quite different than real world conversations. So from the AI side, the language that's used there is far from natural in a couple of different ways. If you've worked with ChatGPT or Gemini, any other generative AI systems, you've seen examples of trustworthiness, of hallucinations, but also the fact that these AI systems tend to be repetitious and overly verbal. They take too long with their turns. And studies have shown that they're very poor at understanding implied meanings that aren't in the literal words that are used in speech. And obviously, AI systems can't detect nonverbal meaning, which is really a severe limitation. From the human side, studies have shown that when a human engages in conversation with a machine, with a chatbot, that we tend to also not use natural language. We tend to avoid social niceties, right? And we tend to be much more direct. We use transactional rather than socially based language. And we tend to simplify our language, use repetitions. We avoid implied meanings because we have the sense as a machine that the machine is that the AI system is going to be less capable of understanding um, kind of the social the implied meaning of utterances that are not literal. And so what that means is that the process, the conversation that we have with a chatbot is far from duplicating a natural human to human conversation. Now, there are benefits to that. We can say, well, it's kind of like practicing a conversation with a less proficient speaker, and that certainly can have benefits. One of the things that's been pointed out is that because AI chatbots are infinitely patient and non-judgmental, that can reduce foreign language anxiety, which is often a problem in learning a second language. There are other issues in substituting a chatbot for human partners. Could be that those are the only conversation partners available. But if that's the case, we should be aware of the fact that this is not a natural conversation and therefore has limitations in terms of developing real world competency in terms of interactional and pragmatic abilities. One of the other issues I'll point out is that the training data, as I mentioned before, is Western oriented, and that brings with it a cultural bias that can be problematic. And particularly if we're thinking about the importance of cultural authenticity in a less commonly taught language, not in English, then certainly that can bring issues into play. Studies have shown that in other languages other than high resource languages like English or Chinese, that cultural uh, uh, mistakes and errors can often be in the output from an AI system. So what is the future of language learning, language teaching? Well, teachers are not going to go away, but we have to adapt. We have to adjust to the presence, the availability of AI systems. We need to make sure that in teaching another language, that we not just rely on AI as a partner, but that we give students lots of practice with human partners. And one of the ways to do that is through virtual exchange or telecollaboration. This is something that's not available through AI, and it's a wonderful way to develop interactional and pragmatic abilities because you have to negotiate meaning with your conversation partner and negotiate cultural knowledge as well. So this is really something that we need to keep in place despite the prevalence of AI-based language learning. Teachers will remain critically important part of language learning. AI chatbots can't do it all. They won't be replaced anytime soon by AI robots. AI can't supply the emotional support that's so important in something as emotionally uh, involved as language learning. It's something that's very different than other disciplines in the sense that it gets very personal and particularly with adult learners can be very problematic. And that's where we need the understanding presence of a human teacher. So human teachers won't go away, but teachers will need to adapt both in terms of learning activities, but also in terms of assessments, realizing what it is that AI can supply and take that into account in assessing student work. And the last thing that I'll mention is that critical AI literacy is needed, but at the same time, we have to be aware of teacher well-being in the sense that AI is developing so quickly that if you think that you have to follow as a teacher every development that comes about, you're going to get whiplash very soon because things are moving very quickly. And so we need to be, as teachers, we need to be aware of developments in AI, but at the same time, we have to have a balanced work-life relationship and be aware of the fact that we can't know everything about AI. So at that point, I think my time is up and I'll stop this presentation and thank you very much.